Hi, I'm Kay Sears, President of Intelsat General, and I'm honored to introduce General John Hyten. Our nation is blessed to have men and women such as General Hyten leading our defense space capabilities. As head of Air Force Space Command, General Hyten is a keen advocate of defending our nation in both space and cyberspace. He is also uniquely qualified to lead the 40,000 professionals who carry out the Global Air Force Space Command mission. We look forward to working with General Hyten as a global operator to help him deliver on his mission with an architecture that is both affordable and survivable.
Hi, I'm Mike Gruss, military space reporter with SpaceNews. I'm joined by General John Hyten, commander of Air Force Space Command. General Hyten, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Mike.
I wanted to start, and I know you've told the story before, but I wanted to hear a little bit about your background in space growing up in Alabama.
So I grew up in Huntsville, Alabama. My dad came to Alabama in 1965 with the Apollo program. So he got to work in the Saturn V, and I got to see the Saturn V main engine test a lot in Huntsville, the F1 engine. I got to watch my dad help build up the Saturn V at the Cape. Spent a couple summers down at the Cape climbing around the beach while my dad was working on that. I got to go to Chaffee Elementary School and Grissom High School, built after the accident of January 1967. Because I was a science and math guy, I got to meet Werner von Braun when Chaffee Elementary School opened in my backyard in 5th grade. Because of all of those things around me, I developed a passion for space that really exists to this day. And really the reason I stayed in the Air Force, I came in the Air Force in Communications Command, not in Space Command. There was no Space Command at the time. And I was going to stay in 4 years and get out and do something else. And my boss said, if you could do one thing in the Air Force, what would you like to do? And I said, I'd like to do space. And that was 1985, and that's how I got in the space business.
It's turned out pretty well.
It did turn out pretty well.
I know you've been spending a lot of time recently working on your commander's intent, and I was hoping you could explain a little bit about what that is, and then also what this entails and what the next couple of years at Space Command could look like. So
there's really 3 big pieces of the commander's intent. One is to make sure we have a consistency in vision and mission. And the mission and vision of Space Command is basically going to stay the same as it's been for a while. But then it establishes priorities, and it also sets a tone and a speed for how we need to do things. So the mission and vision are the same. Our mission is to deliver the capabilities we need. Our vision is to become the best in the world. We need to be able to figure out how to go fast in doing that, though, because the world is moving tremendously fast right now. The nations that are operating in space are doing different things every day. We need to figure out how to stay ahead of them as we go forward. And so then it establishes priorities. And my priorities are really pretty simple and straightforward, I think. Priority number 1 is to win the fight we're in today. And we have capabilities that are essential to everything we do in every military operation today, and we have to make sure we provide that support. It's critical in space and cyberspace. So today's fight is priority number 1. Priority number 2 is to prepare for the fight that may come tomorrow. And so we don't know what tomorrow's going to bring, but there are new and increasing threats in both space and cyberspace that we have to prepare ourselves to deal with. And so priority number 2 is prepare for tomorrow's fight. And priority number 3 is really maybe the most important, and that is to take care of our airmen and their families. Because our airmen are the people that do the mission. My son likes to joke that since I made general, I don't really do any real work anymore. And to a certain extent, that's true, because the airmen in my command, 40,000 airmen, 134 locations around the world, they do the mission. And so we need to make sure we take care of them.
How do you increase that speed? How do you get faster?
So the way we have to get fast, and that's one of the reasons behind the intent, is I want to make sure my intent is clear to the men and women of Air Force Space Command. It really is an internally focused document to make sure that everybody understands the intent, the priorities, where we're going, mission, vision, all the way through. And so if they understand that, my direction to them is, within this intent, you're authorized to do whatever you need to do, talk to whoever you need to do, go wherever you need to go, and do the things that you need to do in order to make this intent a reality. And so I don't want them coming to me unless it's something that's different than in the intent. If it's different than the intent, then we need to talk about it. We need to
So limiting the bureaucracy.
limit the bureaucracy of getting us out, getting us involved in the internal and external communities that we have to deal with in order to move things forward and move things forward fast. And I think the momentum is moving that way. It's been moving that way for a couple of years. We just need to go faster every day.
So if I were to talk to you in 3 years, what would look different than it does now?
Well, 3 years from now, I would hope that we have established more real-time capabilities to deal with the environment that we have to deal with in both space and cyberspace. Because right now, if you look at the capabilities we have, they're really pretty remarkable. Capabilities in many cases that have changed the world. But where we're lacking is our ability to fully immerse and deal with the command and control of those capabilities in a real-time fashion in a contested scenario. So I would hope 3 years from now, what you see is a more real-time ability to deal with the challenges of today.
And how would you, in using your word real-time, how would you classify the response now? Is it?
I would say
is
it's
there-
near real-time,
Okay.
and it differs depending on the mission.
Okay.
And so some missions were more effective than others. I think we're effective in every mission. I think we'd be the envy of the world. I think if you or anybody else in the world, you'd be thrilled with the ability that the United States has to bring space to bear in a fight. But in terms of being able to deal real time, right now, it differs across each mission area. And that's where we have to move to everybody being in that real time environment.
You talked about the threat. How is the threat different than it was a year ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago? And has the threat changed based on what you've learned from some of the capabilities you have on orbit now?
Well, the threat has been maturing for a long time. I think the big wake-up call was the Chinese ASAT test in 2007 that caused everybody to take a step back and say, wow, there are folks in this world that are moving down a very threatening path in space and also a kinetic path. Both of those things are concerning. I don't think any American should ever want to go to war in space. I certainly don't want to go to war in space, especially kinetically. But we have to be able to protect ourselves. Our national policy tells us to protect ourselves. We have the right of self-defense in every domain we operate in. One of those domains is space. We have to be willing and able to protect ourselves at all times. I think we are today, but we need to get better at that every day that goes by. We're moving in that direction, but the threat has been maturing since 2007, to go back to the original question. And as that threat matures and we see the various elements out there and continuing testing in Asia, continuing testing across the board, we see things happening. We have to make sure that we are ready today to respond to those kind of scenarios.
But it seems like the rhetoric has increased in the last year or two. Is that just more something that's happening publicly, or has the threat increased in the last year? Because the ASAT test was 7 years ago.
The ASAT test was 7 years ago, but in the last 7 years, those kind of capabilities continue to mature. They do. There's been tests this year. You've seen the reports of the tests this year. Fortunately, they didn't create a kinetic mess like the test in 2007 did, but nonetheless, they continue to mature those capabilities. Other folks around the world continue to build those capabilities. I'm not going to talk about operational intelligence information in a public interview, but nonetheless, those continue to mature. And as we mature and as we see those mature, that's what we're having to respond to. That's why we need to talk about them a little bit more.
Sequestration is still on the table. What are you doing differently this year than you did, or what's Space Command doing differently than it did the last time this came up 2 years ago?
Well, the quick answer is we're not doing anything different. That's really the challenge as we look at sequestration in 2016. That's probably my biggest concern is sequestration in 2016. We actually have a budget now. Right. The budget was passed by the Congress. Hopefully everything will close out this week and it'll become law. It's not there yet, but it seems imminent that we'll have a budget for this year, and that will stabilize things for 2015. But if in 2016 we go back to the Budget Control Act, the problem that we have in space is a significant issue that is different than almost any other domain. And it's also significant in cyber, but space is the biggest challenge because on the aviation side of our Air Force, it's horrendous to basically ground an F-16 squadron, an F-22 squadron, ground operational units and not allow them to train and operate because of the lack of resources. That's a bad thing. But what do we do in space? Do we shut down GPS? Do we shut down SBIRS? Do we shut down AEHF? Do we shut down ground-based radars, ground-based telescopes? Do we just shut those things down in order to save the money? And the answer is no, we can't shut down GPS. We can't shut down those capabilities. So in 2013, the way we paid our bills in sequestration is we laid off basically half of our civilian contractor workforce, and then we moved to shut down basically everything that we could on the ground-based side to get to a minimum essential capability. Many of those decisions are difficult. Some of them came back to bite us because we made some mistakes as we went through that, but we took risk all the way down to that minimum level. Now, if we go below where we were in 2013, and we've already cut down our contractor workforce, we've already taken down to a minimum essential range at Vandenberg and Patrick, what do we do in 2016 in order to meet that? That's what's concerning me right now. So the answer is we're doing nothing different.
Do you have a plan for the 16 budget, though, that includes sequestration?
We're working through a plan.
Okay.
I can't tell you the details of that
Sure.
plan right now, but as we work through that plan, it involves shutting things down.
Okay.
And we'll have to shut down some things in order to comply with the law, and we will not go anti-deficient. And when we shut those things down, then it will have an impact, and we'll see where we end up. But I hope not to go there. I really hope not to go there, but we're doing the planning now as any good steward of the taxpayers' dollars would do.
Any interview with you these days has to include a little bit of talk about launch.
Mm-hmm.
I want to ask quickly about the SpaceX certification and where that stands. I think the conventional wisdom is, yes, SpaceX is going to be certified, and now it becomes a question of when and are they eligible, will they be eligible to win the NRO mission? I think it's NROL
L79.
79, yes. So how close is SpaceX right now?
Well, we're still going through the certification process. We haven't come to that conclusion. That certification process is a business decision that one of my commanders, Lieutenant General Sam Greaves, at the Space and Missile Systems Center in Los Angeles has to make. He'll make that decision when he's ready. All the information has come to him now. Now he has to walk through and decide exactly where he's going to go and what he's going to do. I would imagine that there will be an announcement this month sometime. I think we need to make a public announcement this month sometime because it is December, and that's the month we've been shooting for. I don't know where he's going to come out, but I can tell you that both SpaceX and the 150 Air Force personnel that have been working that issue have been working it night and day to try to get there. And I think we're close. I don't know how close. You'd have to ask General Greaves that.
Sure. And that certification is necessary to win that NROL 79 mission.
Yes, according to the policy that we've signed and the agreements we've made with any new entrant, they have to be certified before they can have a contract award. Okay. Or compete for a contract.
Okay. In the NDAA that was just passed last week, there's $220 million for a new rocket engine. That similar language is in the omnibus bill. What would the Air Force do with that $220 million, and is there an acquisition strategy for that money?
There's a strategy that's not fully fleshed out. Again, you'll have to get the details from the acquisition side of the house. But the quick summary is that we have good partnerships with NASA, good partnerships with Marshall in Huntsville. We have good partnerships with industry on a significant amount in terms of the tens of millions of dollars of technology work that we know needs to be done in terms of engine development. We also have put out an RFI recently with industry and said, as you look forward to a new engine, what are the possibilities out there? And there's huge interest from industry across that board. We have a plan to continue that process, leading to an RFP next summer sometime to come back and give us those details. I think it's a good plan, but we have to look at the language now, both on the authorization side and the appropriation side, to make sure we fully understand the intent of Congress and what Congress is meaning for us to do with that $220 million. And then we'll need to socialize back and forth with Congress to make sure we execute according to that intent. I think the language it's pretty complicated, but I think the intent is pretty straightforward. The intent is to get off the RD-180. Now we have to start working down that.
Is it possible to do that by fiscal year 19, as they seem to be, Congress seems to be directing?
That's the intent, and we'll have to work with industry to see how far we can get there. That's a very aggressive schedule, but I think Congress put an aggressive schedule there on purpose. That wasn't a mistake.
ULA has teamed up with Blue Origin and is working on an engine. How does that fit into any kind of acquisition strategy, if at all, for that 220?
The challenge we have is that ULA for the Atlas V has teamed with Blue Origin for the BE-4 as the engine for the Atlas V replacement. In order to go down that path, they'll have to have a new first stage, though, to match that engine, because it's a methane engine and not a kerosene engine like the first stage of the RD-180 or the Atlas V is right now. On the Delta IV side, it's the RS-68 on the bottom. SpaceX has a Merlin engine on theirs, and so one of the challenges we have is to develop a technology, and I think the intent of Congress is LOX hydrocarbon. We'll have to work with Congress to make sure they understand what that is, whether we're limited on the technology or not. Again, we have some work to do to figure that out. But as we start working through that process, we have to figure out exactly how to build an engine that any part of industry then could use as we come through. And that's the challenge in the rocket business, because you usually match an engine to a rocket. And so we have to work with Congress to make sure we understand exactly what that is before we go down.
I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about disaggregation and resilience. And I know you always love talk about putting a number on resilience, but right. Has the case, the GAO recently came out with a report and talked about more studies were needed before a decision on disaggregation was made. And I wasn't sure, in your mind, is the case for disaggregation made on warfighting principles as opposed to affordability? I mean, is affordability not the issue to be looking at here, or where does that factor in as you make a decision about disaggregation?
So the first requirement is a resilient warfighting architecture in space that allows us to operate through any kind of degraded environment in space, whether that's a degraded natural environment, degraded man-made environment, or threatened environment. We need a resilient architecture to allow us to continue to provide these fundamental capabilities. The second piece of the puzzle is affordability, because we do have a budget issue in this country. We do have concerns that we have to work through as we're walking through to make sure that we're building the best capabilities we can for the best price. I think that's the natural thing any American would want us to do. So we have to balance those two kind of pieces. Disaggregation is a way to get at both of those, but disaggregation is not the solution to every problem. Disaggregation can work for certain mission areas in a big way, it can work in a small way for certain mission areas, and it may not be the answer in other mission areas. So the only issue I really had with the GAO study was it lumped everything together in disaggregation and said we need more study. What we're going to bring forward is in every mission area, we'll bring forward an answer that incorporates disaggregation and a number of other things to give us that resilient capability that we need in the future. And disaggregation is a big part of that, but it's not the be-all, end-all solution for that. And the GAO study made it look like disaggregation was the solution to all our problems, and we just needed to study that more. It's a mission-by-mission issue that we have to go through.
But it sounds like what I'm hearing you say is that there will be a disaggregated approach to nearly every mission area.
But disaggregation will be a big part of every consideration that we have for every future constellation, because we need to address resilience and affordability, and that's one way to get after it. It has the potential. I can't give you the answer in every mission area, but it has the potential to look very different in GPS than it does in SATCOM. Very different in those kind of cases because of the different missions that are done.
Okay. When will we start seeing the kind of fruition of that? Will it be in the 16, 17 budget? When do we start to see a little bit more of potentially disaggregated
So if you look at our requirements, we need to start the recapitalization of kind of the current programs. We'll need to start those programs in the early part of the next decade. So if you need to start them in the early part of the next decade, we'll have to start considering it in our future year defense plan in the FY17 budget. So when we deliver the FY17 budget, in the out years, you will see details of what we believe those capabilities are going to look like. The near years will be a space modernization initiative program that will lead and feed those programs. So you'll see those pieces come together tied together completely in the FY17 budget.
Okay, so we're seeing hints and probably some more hints in 16, and then a fuller picture in 17.
A fuller picture in 17, absolutely.
Okay. I wanted to talk a little bit about SATCOM and how you view ComSatCom versus MilSatCom, and what your vision for that is moving forward, and how that might be executed.
So I have an operational vision. Now I'm, as the commander of Air Force Space Command, my command focuses on organize, train, and equip. The actual operational commander is the commander of STRATCOM, Admiral Haney, and the commander of the Joint Force Functional Component for Space, Lieutenant General Raymond. But operationally, I think SATCOM needs an ability to fight SATCOM in a joint and integrated way that integrates the Navy narrowband capabilities, the Air Force and Army wideband capabilities, the Air Force protected capabilities, along with commercial SATCOM. And they have to be integrated so that you can move in a threatened environment from not only one channel to another channel, but from one frequency to another frequency if you have a multi-band receiver capability. We need to figure out how to operationalize that and fight that, and we're going to start walking down that path with our service partners, with Strategic Command, and with the commander of GFCC Space, and figure out how to do that. We've started that path, and now Congress has put words to say, do we need a single service focused on the acquisition of those capabilities?
And they suggested SMC.
They suggested SMC, and we'll work with OSD to come. I'm not sure exactly what the right answer is, but I know that it's better if you're a buyer and you have the ability to look at an enterprise to get a better price. And so I understand the intent of Congress. I'll just have to work with DISA, the other service partners, and OSD to make sure that we come up with a good answer as we walk down that path.
But you think SMC is a plausible solution?
SMC is a plausible solution. I just don't know right now if it's the best solution.
Okay.
We'll have to work through the analysis to decide that. And that's what Congress has asked us to do pretty quickly.
Right. I know you guys are either have started or are about to kick off an AOA on WGS. How does that, what's the timeline for that, and will it inform any kind of decision you have to make on WGS, I guess, 11 and beyond? And is that a possibility, or what do you see beyond WGS 10?
Well, we need to work through the entire wideband analysis. And the analysis of alternatives is going to evaluate acquiring that from a commercial capability, acquiring that on a commercial model, acquiring that on a long-term lease, acquiring that in a number of different places, and we'll walk through that. But again, we'll have to show some of our cards in the 17 budget because even though the AOA won't be complete at that time, we need to start putting those pieces on the table so we have a way to get after the future. But I think it's important to not look at just a traditional model, but to look at any number of models, and I think that's what the AOA will ask us to do.
And how does or I guess related to that, you also have work on the protected tactical waveform. How do you see that kind of working with WGS and adding capability, protected communication capability?
So we have it's interesting when you look at the old MilStar satellites that we have right now, and you look at the advanced extremely high frequency AEHF satellites, they're built for nuclear warfighting. That's why they were designed and built that way. It's also interesting to see the small tactical units that now use those capabilities because they provide very unique communication capabilities to somebody that's way out away from their home units, and they need to be able to communicate securely without fear of interception. So they use those capabilities right now. Small tactical units are using those giant 7-ton satellites. Truly a remarkable transformation. But if you look at what they really need, do they need that signal off of that big satellite? Or can we develop a protected tactical waveform that we could perhaps put in the wideband capability that gives them more flexibility as they go out? So that's part of the disaggregation concept. Can we take some of those capabilities that we put on those giant satellites and bin them off and come up with a more efficient, effective way to provide them those capabilities that they need in order to conduct that mission? That's the perfect use of disaggregation to get after those kind of sets. And maybe you can do that much more affordably than putting all of those requirements on those giant spacecraft.
Part of that equation too, I know you've talked about, is ground stations and kind of, I don't know about rethinking, but kind of remaking how the Air Force views ground stations. I was hoping you could elaborate a little bit on that and what what do you see ground stations of the future kind of
Well,
looking
without going into all kinds of technical detail here, I'll just say that our ground stations are all built on a 20th century model and focused on flying and operating our spacecraft. What we need in the 21st century are ground systems that are focused on the effects that our systems create. The effects that soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, Coast Guardsmen all need on the battlefield today, and the effects should be the focus of our ground system. And so we need to shift our focus from flying the satellite to the focus on delivering the effect. And as you do that, you come up with a more effective way to operate those systems through a contested environment because you're focused on the warfighter that needs those effects right now, right today. So it's really moving from a 20th century construct into a 21st century construct. We've been down that path for a couple of years. The momentum is too slow right now. We have to fundamentally look at different ways of doing business.
That's the getting faster you were talking about?
Getting faster to get the capabilities that are on the satellites right now to the warfighters that need to and allow us to operate in a contested environment.
And so is the commercial provisioning studies you guys are doing, is that part of this, or is that?
All of these studies are linked together.
Okay.
All of these studies, again, it goes back to the resilient warfighting construct, with disaggregation being a part of that. So as we go through the commercial provisioning piece, commercial provisioning allows more capability and more platforms that are a different set of constructs, so it allows you to get after a more affordable, resilient way of doing business, mostly in the communication side in that area. And so it's all linked together. None of these are separate studies just for space sake. It's all part of an integrated warfighting approach.
I believe over the summer, but maybe it was late spring, the GSSAP satellites launched, and we haven't heard much since then, but was wondering if you could provide any kind of update on how those are performing and what you've learned so far from them.
So the Geosynchronous Space Situation Awareness Program is the first two satellites were launched in July, and they're going through checkout right now. The thing about any first-of-a-kind satellite that you launch is that you really don't know exactly. It's not like GPS, where we've launched 4 GPS satellites last year. We have 31 operational GPS on orbit right now. These are the first 2, and they're operating in an environment and in a way that we have to be very careful that we understand fully how they operate. So we're taking a very deliberate approach to checking the satellites out to make sure we understand exactly how they work, exactly how the systems are characterized, exactly what we see and understand. And it'll still be a couple months before we get to an initial operational capability as we walk through that deliberate approach. But I can tell you that they're doing well, they're healthy, and I'm not going to get into the operational details.
We should expect to see more this year or next year?
We won't talk a lot about the products off of that capability.
Okay.
We'll talk about the health of the satellite. We'll talk about the fact that they're doing well or they're not doing well, but we won't get into the operational details.
Okay. One more disaggregation question. What kind of role do hosted payloads play in this, and how will the HOPS contract be utilized? So far, it seems that's been largely for NASA and scientific missions, but was wondering what kind of push you've given to have some military payloads go through that program.
So I believe that the hosted payloads are another option for resilient warfighting structures, another option for disaggregation, because you can put certain capabilities. We've already done a hosted payload on the infrared side. We need to look at hosted payloads on the communication side. I think we can look at hosted payloads on the situational awareness side. The great things about HOPS is now we have a contract vehicle to walk in to do that. I think on the communication side, we need to work with DISA and other partners. We need to understand the acquisition approaches. I think we have some good ideas in partnering with DISA on how to walk down that path. We'll look at that on the SATCOM side. But there's all kinds of benefits that we can get there in the future architectures and the way we're going to do these missions in the future that we're going to look through one by one, missionary by missionary, to take advantage of those kind of capabilities.
Okay. I want to go through a couple programs real quick and just get an update. The DMSP flight, that's Flight 20, that's been mentioned in the NDAA. I know there's a study going on, and when might we expect a decision, and how close is that?
I think you'll see a decision in the next few months. We're still working inside the Department of Defense and the executive branch of the government to figure out exactly how we're going to do. The one thing I'll say is that If it's decided we're going to launch DMSP 20, it'll be ready to launch. And we're working through that to make sure that Flight 20 is fully capable and ready to go if the decision is made that that's going to be another competitive launch that we're going to go.
And it would be a
down.
competitive launch if
It would be a competitive launch if we walk down through. At least that's where we stand right now. But
Oh.
that's the decision process we go through. And again, to have a competitive launch, you have to have multiple vendors to compete. I think we'll be in that environment at the time. But we got a lot of work to do before we get there.
The GPS-3 payload, the navigation payload, how close is that, and what's the, I guess, possibility for an open competition then for GPS-3, 9, and beyond?
So the initial capability was delivered to Lockheed Martin in Waterton Canyon, Colorado. It's integrated onto GPS-3 Flight 1. It's gone through the initial testing. Everything looks good now. We're pleased with the final delivery of that capability. It is 2 years late, so it's frustrating there, but we're pleased with the fact that it is delivered now. And the measure for success is, will it work? And then can 2, 3, and 4 come right after that? Because those satellites are basically lined up in the plant waiting for those payloads to come in. So I'm optimistic now that we're past that problem and we'll be able to get through. Now as for a competitive piece, I think whether it's in 9 or 10 or beyond, at some point we'll have a competitive payload. At some point down the road, we'll move to a digital payload. We're still in an analog payload capability. At some point we're going to move to a digital payload. When that is, you'll have to talk to the acquisition folks and get the details, but at some point I know we'll move to a digital payload.
Okay. On Cybers, you guys are still in an AOA on that. When might we see digital focal planes, or what the insertion of new technologies? How close are we on some of those?
So again, we're going through the AOA. We're going to get good answers, I hope, out of the AOA in a timely manner. But and ideally, under the current process, that would inform our budget submission in 17. But however that works out, we're going to submit what we believe the ideas are for the overhead persistent infrared OPIR system of the future, and we're going to show our hand in 17 to say this is where we think we're going to go. It's still in the out years. We still have many years to discuss that, but we'll walk through that as we go down.
There's been talk in Luxembourg about a GovSat constellation. I don't know if you've been following that at all.
I'm not involved.
Okay.
I'm not involved with that. I've read it.
I wasn't sure if it changed the calculus at all on WGS or moving forward.
I've only read probably what you've read.
Okay.
So the one thing I'll say about those kind of construct is that we want to have international partners. WGS is already an international satellite with multiple partners. AHF is an international satellite as well with multiple partners. And so as we go forward, we want to continue those international partnerships, expand those international partnerships, especially in communications. Because as we go into conflicts with our allies, it's always better if we're on the same communications system. That allows us to interface better as allies, and we want to go down that path. So it's not unlikely that the next generation wideband will be a broader international community that works down that path.
I want to ask one question on cyber and what, how you guys have been closing some of the vulnerabilities there throughout the space enterprise, and what to. It's not something that's talked about a lot, but what should we kind of watch for the next couple years related to cyber, and specifically in the space element?
So broadly, I'll hit cyber real quickly because we're making tremendous progress on the cyber elements in two areas. One, Air Force Space Command has the cyber responsibility in the Air Force, right. And we're moving in partnership with the Army and DISA to really develop the joint information environment. And we've worked with the Army to put the first joint regional security stack, the GRSS, the joint gateway in at San Antonio. It's working extremely well. We're going to push that out across the rest of the Air Force and the Army. I think we have a great partnership right now moving into that joint environment. And then we're building with Cyber Command the Cyber Mission Force. Space Command and the Air Force are responsible for 39 teams. We're building those 39 teams, national mission teams, cyber mission teams, cyber protection teams, to kind of address the cyber problems that we have, making huge progress. And then uniquely in Space Command, it's great to have cyber as part of Element because we have some very unique vulnerabilities that we have addressed and continue to address in a very aggressive way. GPS, for example, has external connections all across the world. And we have addressed those connections. We're going through the legacy capabilities, and our new capability in OCX will provide even more defensive mechanisms. We're going through our satellite control network and developing even more aggressive defensive mechanisms so that we are very confident that we have the ability to defend the networks that we have in the space business. We still have a lot of work to do. Cyber is one of those areas where the threat is increasing every day. It's different every day. And if you say, I'm secure today, then tomorrow you got a new challenge and you have to go after it. So it's a continuing fight, but we have some awesome airmen that are doing spectacular work to defend ourselves, and I feel very confident that if somebody came aggressively against our networks, number one, we'd know it, and number two, we could do something about it.
General Hyten, thanks for joining us today.
All right, thanks very much, Mike. I appreciate it.